We need to stop recklessly using labels to box people and limit our conversations. Labels limit alliances. They limit cooperation. They limit people working together, trying to find solutions together, right? We need to think of sitting beside one another and looking at a problem as a team, seeking to understand each other's perspectives. Maybe one person has some points because they have a different view of the situation than the other. And then we can really get a bigger picture of things, seek to understand each other and look at the problem, analyze it more effectively, and come up with solutions that make, multiple people, multiple parties happy instead of being at odds with one another, against one another. So we think of things like pro versus anti, for example. Anything pro versus anything anti is 100% going to be in opposition to one another. By definition, they are antagonistic. It doesn't matter what you are saying. It will automatically put two people against each other. And for example, if you say pro-vaxxer versus anti-vaxxer, what about the people who aren't anti-vaxxer? They've got lots of vaccines, but they don't like one particular vaccine or a certain set of vaccines. And you're labeling them anti-vaxxers. I mean, like we've seen people, health experts, like virologists, vaccine developers. We've seen the chief scientist of Pfizer being called an anti-vaxxer, which is very weird. Sorry, the former chief scientist. But people label. And then with these labels comes also conflations to other labels. So if someone's an anti-vaxxer, oh, there must be a flat earther. Oh, they must be a Trump supporter, right? Oh, they must be freedom, gun-loving, pro-life, drive a truck, have lots of guns. And the person who is pro-vaccine, well, that must be a collectivist, statist, who's LGBTQ, gender pronoun loving, purple hair, communist, BLM, liberal logic type person. Right? We're not even seeking to understand each other as individuals the second we label people certain ways. That's exactly what we're doing by grouping people. Like literally by grouping people, you are placing them in a collective group so that you don't even have to listen to their individual perspectives. We need to realize that that limits so many things and it dehumanizes people. Think about how many people are fighting for these things. It doesn't matter which side you're on. People are fighting for this. They are losing friends. They are losing family because of this. You'd think they might have a reason for it. You'd think that, hey, you know what? This person has a particular position on this topic. Perhaps they have seen some evidence I haven't seen, or they have some reasoning I haven't heard. Perhaps there's a perspective that I don't know and I should seek to understand it. And then we can have a conversation and come out with a better solution together. At the very least, we're seeking to understand each other. We're listening to one another. It doesn't work when people aren't even trying to listen to one another. How can anyone pretend to have empathy or compassion when they are just labeling people and then discarding them, as if their positions don't even matter? But we take these conflations and it just ruins everything. It just perpetuates polarization. It creates polarization. The labels create polarization if it isn't there. And then any little bit of misunderstanding that people have, it will perpetuate it because it doesn't open the door to constructive, honest conversations. And if you aren't seeking to have an honest conversation, then you aren't trying to be right or to find out what is true. You are simply trying to win an argument, and you are trying to avoid or evade the truth. There's a quote by Ayn Rand, which I really like, which is, "When I disagree with a rational man, I let reality be the final arbiter. If I am right, he will learn. If I am wrong, I will. One of us will win, but both will profit." And that last bit is the most important part. Both will profit. No one profits from being wrong. If we are talking about the pandemic, for example, and we are looking for a solution out of this, the safest way out of this, the best course, the best path to take, well, obviously the best path is the one that is beneficial to the most amount of people. If we do something that costs lives, well, that's a pretty big mistake. Cool, you won your argument, but it cost people a lot of lives. Or cool, you won your argument, but a lot of people lost their freedoms, or a lot of businesses were closed, or unemployment is really high. The economy is destroyed, right? And that's a whole thing. Like, we take the pandemic as an example, and we have a health-centric group and a freedom-centric group going head to head. They've been placed head to head, and they don't need to be head to head. Okay? It's not mutually exclusive like that. Okay? The health-centric perspective is fear of a virus. They are afraid that they might die, or all of their loved ones will die, will get hurt. And that's a valid thing to be afraid of. No one wants to die. No one wants their close loved ones to die either. And no one wants other people in the world to just die for no reason either. Like, we all value life, or I think we all value life. The freedom-centered group is afraid of an authoritarian, tyrannical government expanding and infringing on our rights, taking away our rights and freedoms. And that's a valid thing. In history, governments have always expanded. They have never gotten smaller. Governments have always expanded. The laws have always been more and more, the law books have always gotten bigger and bigger throughout history. And that's a normal thing to be afraid of as well. Freedom is something to value. So if you look at those two, for example, one of them is going to say something like, what good is it to be alive if you have no freedoms, right? That's a freedom-centric view. What good is it to be alive if you're a slave, if you need permission just to live, just to do things? Otherwise, you have to stay home. You need a passport to go everywhere, show me your papers, this, that, and the other. Or the other group is going to say, well, what good is it to have all your freedoms if you're dead and everyone you know is dead? Those are both valid fears, guys. You can have both, you can hold both of those fears at the same time. And the question is, why hasn't anyone taken these two perspectives, which are going head to head, and put them on the same side of the table to ask a simple question? How can we minimize health risks while protecting our rights and freedoms? Have you seen that question anywhere? Have you seen anyone trying to have that conversation? You have public health experts pushing all of these crazy measures, taking away people's rights and freedoms. It's all over the media. Politicians don't even question it. They are silent. Our opposition in Canada is literally silent. They haven't said anything. They started to speak up last week, and then the leader, O'Toole, basically shut her up. Tried to start another caucus, and it's already been shut down. But basically, no politicians have been speaking up. There's two politicians who have been speaking up consistently throughout this entire pandemic. That's Roman Baber, who got kicked out of his party, and he's now an independent, and an independent, Randy Hillier. Those are the only two who have been speaking out consistently. None of the parties have been anywhere in this conversation when it comes to protecting freedoms. They've all been silent and listening to the public health experts. The only party is a new party, the People's Party of Canada, led by Maxime Bernier, and that's the only party that has been trying to say, hey, freedom first. Let's protect our freedoms. We don't have to give up our freedoms. But why hasn't anyone just had the conversation? Hey, how do we protect our lives while protecting our freedoms? And why is that such a crazy thing to ask? It's almost as if people want this conflict to exist because maybe they don't want to protect both at the same time, our rights and freedoms and our health. Maybe there's a different narrative. Maybe there's some sort of agenda that we're not sure of. Maybe the things that our prime minister said, like it's an opportunity to push the agenda for 2030. Or Krista Freeland, she's a board member of the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, right? They're all connected. So maybe people are using this as an opportunity. Maybe these labels are being used by the media, which is state funded. Look up how many millions of dollars, okay, the Liberal government gives to our media, and then you'll start to see things differently. Why are these labels all being pushed? Why are these labels being grouped together? Some people benefit from conflict. There's that story. It's been floating around since this entire pandemic started, when people are trying to point this out, when they're trying to say, don't listen to everything in the media. It's trying to push conflicts so that it can, divide and conquer us, control us. And whether you believe in, the Great Reset, these agendas by an elite class of people trying to push things on us, whether you believe it or not, you still have to at least be open to the idea that it exists. So this analogy is the ants in the jar. The analogy goes something like this. You take 100 red fire ants and 100 huge black ants, and you put them in this big jar. And you let them go about their day, and they're gonna coexist fine. No problems. Everything works. They just don't even notice each other. They live, they do their own thing. But if the second you take that jar and you shake it, they start to fight one another and they kill each other. And then one of them gets wiped out eventually. They never stop to think who's shaking the jar. It's shaking. They never stop to go, oh, earthquake. Are you okay, man? Did you do that? No, you didn't? Well, I didn't do it. Well, how do you think that happened? Well, I don't know. Maybe someone shook our world. I don't know. I don't know what conversation they would have, but the point is they jump right to the conclusion of fighting one another. And that's what happens when we use labels. Labeling people places other people's perspectives into paradigms that promote conflict. We are perpetuating polarization by using these labels, and we need to seek to understand one another and treat each other as individuals, as if we are all free-thinking individuals capable of thinking. So we should explore, why do you think what you think? It is that simple. Respect the human being across from the table, and perhaps go sit next to them or bring them around to sit next to you so that we can look at these problems together and find the truth together to seek solutions together.